Welcome to the Homeowners chapter. Homeowners and dwelling are probably the most confusing part of your test. Homeowners insurance and dwelling insurance use similar names, use similar coverages, but they are different policies. Before we begin, let's talk about the differences between homeowners insurance and dwelling insurance. These are very important to know for your test. So the previous chapter was dwelling, and in dwelling insurance you had to have up to 1 to 5 units of residential housing. Homeowners, though, you can have up to 1 to 4 units of residential housing. Dwelling insurance, you could have a maximum of 5 boarders. That's 5 people renting rooms, so roomers, in addition to the families. So like you could have 1 person in 1 unit, then they rent out a separate room to a college student. Homeowners, you can have up to 8 boarders. That's 2 boarders per unit. So like a homeowner's policy can have a single family home, a duplex, a triplex, a quadplex, and you can have 1 family per unit and then 2 boarders per unit. So a maximum of 8 boarders, because the maximum number of units, like a quadplex, a fourplex, you can only have 4 units and 2 boarders per unit. Homeowners insurance, you have to live in the house. But dwelling policies, you do not have to live in the house. Typically, the house you live in, you have homeowners insurance on, and the house you rent out to other people, like investment properties, are dwelling policies. Dwelling policies are also typically used for older houses that don't qualify for homeowners. Homeowners policies are typically homes that are 25 years and newer. Dwelling policies might be an older house that hasn't been updated, or it could be a new house that you rent out to somebody else. Homeowners policies, you must live in the house. Dwelling policies, you do not have to live in the house. Now let's say you have 2 properties, 2 homes on the same property, and you build 1 house and then next to it you build another house. The house you live in can be on homeowners, but the house you don't live in would have to be a dwelling policy. So even if you have 2 homes on the same property, only one of them can be a homeowner's policy, unless you connect them by, say, the foundation or the roof line or something like that. Then you can have another unit. So you'd have to connect the houses for it to be homeowners insurance on that secondary house. Homeowners insurance automatically includes personal liability. Dwelling policies, you have to endorse on liability. Homeowners policies automatically include theft coverage. Dwelling policies, you have to endorse on theft. Homeowners policies tend to be more expensive, but you get a ton of extra coverages for free. Dwelling policies are less expensive, but you don't get all of the free coverages, and dwelling policies, you get to pick and choose the coverages you want. Homeowners is more of a complete package policy, which will be similar to a business owner's policy later on, because homeowners, you have all these free coverages. You might not use them all. You're getting a discount for it all, but since you live in the house, you tend to be a little bit more safer. Dwelling, you get to pick and choose the coverages you want, but it tends to be more expensive if you added up all the coverages that a homeowner's policy had. Now let's see the different names for the homeowners and dwelling policies. There's 3 types of dwelling policies, and there's 6 types of homeowners policies. There's a dwelling policy 1 known as basic. There's a dwelling policy 2 known as broad, and there's a dwelling policy 3 known as special. So DP1 is basic, DP2 is broad, DP3 is special. 1 is the worst, 2 is okay, 3 is the best. There's 6 types of homeowners policies, There's an HO2, HO3, HO4, HO5, HO6, and HO8. There is no Homeowners Form 1. There is no Homeowners Form 7. The HO2, just like the Dwelling Policy 2, is known as broad. The HO3, just like the DP3, is known as special. The HO4 is for renters. The HO5 is known as comprehensive, which is the best. The HO6 is known as condo, covers condominiums. And an HO8 is known as modified, also known as historic homes. So there's 3 dwelling policies, DP1 basic, DP2 broad, DP3 special. There's 6 homeowners, HO2 broad, HO3 special, HO4 renters, HO5 comprehensive, HO6 condo, HO8 modified, also known as historic. There is no HO1, there is no HO7. The names of the policies tell you the perils that the structure is covered under, meaning that the house, the actual building, is covered underneath the perils that the policy has. There's 3 primary peril forms. There's the basic cause of loss form, the basic peril form, the broad cause of loss form, and the special cause of loss form. The DP1 basic uses the basic cause of loss form, which is FLE, F-L-E, fire, lightning, and explosion. The worst insurance you can ever get will cover FLE, fire, lightning, and explosion. That's internal explosion, such as like a kerosene heater blows up inside the house. So the DP1 basic covers FLE if the house burns down, if it gets struck by lightning, or if the house explodes from the inside. It's very cheap insurance. The Dwelling Policy 1 can be endorsed up to the Dwelling Policy 1 extended perils. The extended perils are known as WARVs: wind, hail, aircraft, riot, vehicle, volcano, explosion, and smoke. The DP1 extended perils covers everything that the basic perils were and WARVs. So if a windstorm like a tornado or a hurricane hits your house, you're covered. If it hails on your house, you're covered. If a plane hits your house, you're covered. If rioters set fire to your house, the DP1 extended covers it. The DP1 extended perils covers if a vehicle not owned by you hits your house. So like if your neighbor drinks too much and then runs his car through your house, the DP1 extended perils will cover if their vehicle hits your house. But if your 16-year-old daughter hits your house, then the DP1 extended perils will not cover that. The DP1 extended perils also covers external explosion. So like if a kerosene heater outside the house explodes and damages your house, or if your neighbor's house explodes and damages your house. So there's 2 types of explosion. There was internal and external. The basic policy covered internal explosion. The extended perils covered external explosion. And then smoke damage from your house, as long as it's not from a manufacturer. So like if your neighbor's house burns down, the smoke damage damages your house, the DP1 extended perils cover that. So DP1 basic, cheap insurance, probably costs like $200 a year. If you don't want the worst insurance, you can endorse it up to the DP1 extended perils. It will cover FLE, fire, lightning, explosion, and WARVs, wind, hail, aircraft, riot, vehicle, volcano, explosion, smoke. That policy probably costs like $300 a year because you have to pay extra for your structure, your house, to be covered underneath those perils. If you want a better policy, you can go up to a DP2, which is broad. Broad covers everything basic does and the extended perils, and also covers big effect. So a DP2, Dwelling Policy 2 broad, the broad cause of loss form covers fire, lightning, explosion, wind, hail, aircraft, riot, vehicle, volcano, explosion, smoke, and big effect. Burglary, ice, glass. So like if somebody burglarizes your house, or if ice collapses your roof. Glass damage. So a golf ball comes through your window. Burglary, ice, glass, accidental discharge. Accidental discharge is a bursting water heater or a bursting pipe. If your pipes burst accidentally, immediately, then it's covered. But water damage over time is not covered. So burglary, ice, glass, accidental discharge, falling objects, that's things that fall from outside the house in. So that's like a tree that hits your house, or something from a plane, luggage, I guess, falls into your house. So falling objects, typically a tree. Freezing of plumbing. Freezing of plumbing only works if you maintained proper heat control or you drained the pipes. So broad will cover if your pipes freeze and they get damaged. Electrical damage, that's if like your circuit breaker blows up and it breaks some of your stuff like your TV or something like that. As long as the electrical failure happened on premises, not off premises. Meaning that like Austin Energy, if they have a failure, that's not covered under my dwelling policy. But if my circuit breaker breaks and breaks my TV, then I am covered. So electrical, collapse, if my whole house just falls in, I'm covered. The T is not anywhere on your test, but the T is tearing us under. Tearing us under is if your air conditioner outside tears because of the ground. Air conditioners typically sit on like slabs, but some people still place them on the earth. If the earth, not earthquake or anything, but if like the ground breaks and it causes your air conditioner to fall and break, tearing us under covers that. So the basic policy, the DP1, the basic cause of loss form, covers flee, fire, lightning, and explosion. The basic extended perils cover warbs, wind, hail, aircraft, riot, vehicle, volcano, explosion, smoke. But remember, the extended perils only covered you if somebody else's car hit your house. The broad cause of loss form covers you if anything that the basic or basic extended perils occur, and burglary, ice, glass, accidental discharge, falling objects, freezing of plumbing, electrical collapsing and tearing asunder. The broad cause of loss form, this is on your test, also extends the vehicle portion to now if somebody in your house drives a car through your garage. So like a DP1, if your 16-year-old daughter hits the gas and breaks through your garage, the dwelling policy 1, the basic policy, not covered. But under the broad, your 16-year-old daughter hits the gas, goes through your garage, the broad cause of loss form now covers that. So it also expands some of the basic extended coverage. The special policy, though, is the best. The DP3 is what almost everybody buys. If you have a mortgage on your rental property, they're going to make you have a special policy. Special covers your house for almost any scenario. It's known as open peril, except what's excluded. So like earthquake, not covered. We don't like earthquakes. Earthquake is considered one occurrence if it occurs within 3 days. So like, let's say there's an earthquake today, still not covered. Then they have an aftershock tomorrow, still not covered. Earthquakes are excluded under all policies unless you have an earthquake policy. So earthquake is excluded. We're also not going to like underground pipes. Underground pipes are excluded underneath special as well. Underground pipes are if the pipes underneath your house burst. Let's assume that they're like city pipes. DP3 special covers everything except the exclusions, like earthquake, underground pipes, flood. Flood insurance is only covered through the federal government, the National Flood Insurance Program. If your pipes burst, that's covered under broad. But if it floods from the outside, like the rain accumulates on the ground, flood is not covered underneath anything. So we have 3 dwelling policies, DP1 basic, DP2 broad, DP3 special, and their names are the cause of loss forms that the structure is protected against, the actual house. A DP1 covers your house against flea, fire, lightning, explosion. The DP1 extended perils cover flea and wharves, wind, hail, aircraft, riot, vehicle, volcano. We will cover volcanoes. Volcanoes are good. They're covered underneath almost every policy. One volcanic eruption is considered 7 days because volcanoes keep erupting over time. But it still doesn't cover earthquake, explosion, smoke. So like the DP1 extended will cover wind, hail, aircraft, riot, vehicle, volcano, explosion, smoke. So we like volcanoes, we don't like earthquakes. But remember the DP1 will not cover you, the extended perils will not cover you if your daughter drives through your car. The DP2, the broad cause of loss form, protects your house against all the basic perils, flea and wharves, and big effect, burglary, ice, glass, accidental discharge, which is bursting pipes, falling objects, freezing of plumbing, as long as you maintained proper heat control or drained the pipes, electrical failure on premises, collapse and tearing asunder. The DP2 broad also allows your own 16-year-old daughter to hit your house. That's covered. And then DP3 special protects your rental property or your secondary home on an open peril basis. It covers everything except what is excluded, such as earthquake, flood, underground pipes, intentional losses, wear and tear. So the DP3 special is open peril. Now let's go over to the homeowners policies. The homeowners policies, the HO2 broad, covers your house, your structure, against the broad perils. It'll cover your house against flea, wharves, and big effect. So the HO2 is known as broad because the actual house, the structure, is covered against the broad perils. Fire, lightning, explosion, wind, hail, aircraft, riot, vehicle, volcano, explosion, smoke, and burglary, ice, glass, accidental discharge, falling objects, freezing of plumbing, electrical collapse, and tearing asunder. The HO2 broad covers your house against the broad perils. HO3 special is just like a DP3 special, covers your structure on an open peril basis, meaning that it covers everything except the exclusions, earthquake, flood, inherent vice, intentional loss, wear and tear, underground pipes, power failure off premises. Remember, we don't mind power failure on premises, but power failure off premises, not covered. So the HO3 special covers your house against everything except the exclusions. The HO4 renters policy is covers contents only because you don't own the house. We'll talk more about that in a second. The HO5 comprehensive policy is the best policy you can get for your house. The HO6 condo policy covers condominiums. And the HO8 is historic modified. So let's say you own an investment property. You would likely insure that investment property under a DP3. Now, the renter who's in your investment property, they would buy an HO4, which would cover their stuff. So you would have the DP3 because you own the house renting out, but the tenant would have the HO4 for their stuff. Then your primary house that you live in would likely be an HO3 or an HO5 Unless you lived in a condo, you might have an HO6. So you might have multiple policies all either on your own or for customers. The customer's house that they live in would be a homeowner's policy. The ones they rent out to other people would be a dwelling policy. And then if somebody rents that house, then the tenant would have an HO4. Now let's say I just bought a condominium. Which policy would you sell me? And you'd probably sell me the HO6 as long as I'm living in it. But if I wasn't living in the house, if I was renting it to somebody else, you might sell me a DP3. What's the difference between an apartment, an HO4, and a condo, an HO6? An apartment, you don't own the actual structure. Somebody else does. Whereas a condominium, you actually own from everything inside the walls. So like condos will cover the floors of the unit, the countertops, the cabinetry, the toilets, whereas the HO4, the renter's policy, doesn't cover that because you don't actually own the unit. So an HO6 is a condo policy because you own the house, a condo. HO4 is a renter's policy, does not have coverage for all that stuff. Typically, your average customer buys a Homeowners Form 3. The HO3 Special covers most houses for most people. Mortgages typically don't accept an HO2. So mortgage companies usually want you to have at least an HO3. If they have a little bit of extra money, you might sell them an HO5, but it can be a little bit more expensive than the HO3. So most people buy an HO3. If they have extra money, we sell them an HO5. If they're renting an apartment, you sell them an HO4. If they have a condo, you sell them an HO6. And if they have a really old home that's like unique in a historic district, then you might sell them an HO8. The HO8, the Homeowners Form 8, uses something called market value. Market value is for houses where the replacement cost is a lot higher than it would cost to rebuild. So like certain places have historical districts where the house might have been built in 1800 or 1850, and it uses that old wood, and it might have the old like wrought iron handrails. Older houses that are like historic in nature get an HO8, which is a historic home. But if it's just a regular old house out in the middle of nowhere, then it usually gets a dwelling policy. So the houses you rent out to others, you would usually pick a DP1, DP2, DP3, typically a DP3. The house you live in, you'd buy one of the homeowners policies. The names tell you pretty much what the structure is covered under. So like the DP1 basic covers the structure for flea, fires. There's like hostile fire and friendly fire. This covers hostile fires. Friendly fires are like candles or a fireplace, whereas a hostile fire is like one that got out of control. So like basic will cover hostile fires, lightning, internal explosion. The DP1 extended covers flea and wharves, wind, hail, aircraft riot, vehicle from other people hitting your house, volcanoes for 7 days, external explosion, smoke. The DP2 broad cause of loss form covers flea, wharves, but now it'll cover if your daughter breaks your house with her car. And big effect, burglary, ice, glass, accidental discharge, falling objects, freezing and plumbing, electrical on premises, collapse and tearing asunder. And then special covers everything except exclusions like earthquake, flood, intentional loss, inherent vice, underground pipes, wear and tear. So DP3 has exclusions. The HO2 protects your house against the broad perils. The HO3 protects your house against everything. The HO4 is a renter's policy. You don't have any structure coverage. You just have contents coverage. HO5 is the best. We'll talk about why on the next slide. HO6 is condo, and an HO8 is for historic homes. Now, each policy has coverage letters. The names, basic, broad, and special, HO2, HO3, HO4, HO5, HO6, HO8, told you what the house, the structure, was protected against. The coverage letters tell you how much coverage you have. So like coverage A is known as structure. That means that your house is covered for, say, 100,000. So coverage A, which is structure, would tell you your house is covered for 100,000. Coverage B is known as other structures. Coverage B is other detached structures. So that's like a shed. So your house is covered for 100,000. Your shed might be covered for, say, 10,000. Coverage C stands for contents. Coverage C tells you how much your stuff is covered for. So like your TV, your couch. I'm not sure how to draw a couch. That's a couch. So your coverage C insures your contents. And let's just say for 50,000. So coverage A is structure, coverage B is other structures, other detached structures, so like a shed or a detached garage. Coverage C is contents, that's how much your stuff is covered for. Under homeowners, you have the same first three letters. Coverage A is structure, coverage B is other structures, coverage C is contents. But once you get to coverage D, the names change. Coverage D under dwelling is known as fair rental value. Coverage D will pay you your income if your rental property burns down. So the cool thing about this is coverage D, you don't even have to have the rental property rented out. It could be in between tenants. And if it burns down, you still get your income. Coverage D, fair rental value, will pay you the income that you could have gotten since the house burned down. So you could have rented it out, so it'll give you your income. Coverage D is an indirect loss. If you remember from earlier, indirect losses are losses of income that occur over time. So coverage D under dwelling is known as fair rental value. It's an indirect loss that pays you income over time. Coverage E is known as additional living expenses. Coverage E under dwelling will put you up in a hotel. As long as the hotel was more than what your mortgage was. So like if you were paying $1,000 a month for the mortgage and your hotel cost $1,500, coverage E will pay you $500. It's only for the extra costs that you incurred because the house burned down. Under dwelling, coverage D and E were fair rental value and additional living expenses. But under homeowners, coverage D is known as loss of use. Coverage D under homeowners is fair rental value and additional living expenses added together. So coverage D and E under dwelling was fair rental value and additional living expenses. Coverage D under homeowners is loss of use, which is coverage D and E added together for homeowners, fair rental value and additional living expenses. So the names change once you get to coverage letter D. Coverage E under homeowners is known as personal liability. This protects you from a lawsuit such as like a dog bite. If your dog bites somebody, they might sue you. Coverage F under homeowners is known as medical payments to others. This goes hand in hand with liability. Coverage F, if my dog bites somebody, it's going to pay their medical bills for $1,000. Hopefully they don't sue me and have to use coverage E. We'll talk more about medical payments a little bit later. We're just getting the gist of the differences between the two. So under dwelling, you have coverage A, structure, coverage B, other structures, coverage C, contents. Under homeowner, you have coverage A, structure, coverage B, other structures, coverage C, contents. Then under dwelling, coverage D is fair rental value, coverage E is additional living expenses. Under homeowners, coverage D is fair rental value and additional living expenses added together, known as loss of use. Coverage E under homeowners is liability. Coverage F is medical payments to others. So we had our names of the policies, which were known as DP1 basic, DP2 broad, DP3 special. And then under homeowners, we had an HO2, HO3, HO4, HO5, HO6, and HO8. The names of the policies told you what your coverage A and B were protected against. So, coverage A under dwelling, your house was covered underneath the dwelling policy 1, your house was only covered for fire, lightning, explosion. A DP2 broad, your coverage A was covered against flea, wharves, and big effect. And then DP3, your house, your structure was covered against everything. Homeowners, HO2, broad, your house was protected against the broad perils, flea, wharves, big effect. HO3, special, your house was covered against everything. Now an HO4 was a renter's policy. This is for a tenant, an apartment person, a renter. Which coverage letters under homeowners does the renter not need? So the HO4 does not have coverage A or coverage B because under the homeowner's form 4, you don't actually own the house. So you don't need to cover the structure or the shed because you're just renting the apartment. So an HO4 doesn't have coverage A and B. But a condo policy, an HO6, you do own the house. So an HO6 does have coverage A and B. So like an HO4 and an HO6 are very similar. The only difference is the HO4 does not cover the structure, whereas the HO6 does cover the structure. Now let's say I have a rental property I rent to somebody else. I buy a dwelling. Which coverage letters do I need on my rental property? I most certainly want to cover the structure. It's my house. I definitely want to cover the structure. If I have a shed, then I might get coverage B. Coverage C, contents, if it's not my house, if it is my house, but it's not my stuff in the house, I don't really need coverage C contents if I'm renting the house out to other people. It's going to be their stuff, so they can buy their own contents coverage. If it's a house I'm renting out to other people, I do want coverage D, because if the rental house burns down, I want my income, my fair rental value. So I'd definitely buy coverage D, since I have a shed, since I have the house. So I got A, B, and D. No coverage C. Now, if my rental house burns down, do I need to be put up in a hotel? No. So I wouldn't get coverage E. Dwelling policies, you get to pick and choose the coverages you need. So the rental property I'm renting out to other people, I get to choose A, B, and D, opt out of C and E. Don't need it. However, since homeowners policies are package policies, you don't get to opt out. Homeowners policies, you have to buy all the coverage letters that are included. Homeowners has minimum numbers for the coverage letters. They're percentages of the structure. So like if it's a house I live in, my regular house, and it's worth $100,000, I'd insure coverage A for $100,000. If I have a shed, I automatically get coverage B for a minimum of 10%. So like since my house is worth $100,000, my shed is covered for automatically $10,000. Now what if I don't have a shed? I still automatically get coverage B. You cannot opt out of coverages in homeowners. Coverage C, your contents are automatically covered at 50% of coverage A under homeowners. Because with homeowners you have to live in the house, so your stuff's definitely going to be in your house. So like homeowners policies, if my house is worth $100,000, my stuff is covered for at least $50,000 total. What if I don't have $50,000 worth of stuff? Well, under homeowners, I'm still going to get the coverage. Well, what if I have more than $50,000? I can always go up. Homeowners has minimum floors that you can't go under because it's a package policy. Coverage D, loss of use, under homeowners, will pay for my rental income because I could have rented out a room to somebody. It'll also pay to put me up in a hotel. And that's going to be at least 30% of coverage A. So I have $30,000 to receive under coverage D at a minimum. Coverage E is personal liability. Coverage E protects me if somebody gets hurt. That's a minimum of $100,000 under homeowners. Dwelling policies do not have liability. You have to endorse it on. You have to pay extra. You have to endorse it up on dwelling. But homeowners gives you an automatic $100,000. Coverage F under homeowners is $1,000. Coverage F was medical payments to others. So homeowners is a package policy where you have to get all of the coverages. You cannot opt out. Dwelling, you can opt out depending on what you need. Dwelling policies are kind of like picking from a restaurant menu. Dwelling, you get to pick and choose what you want. If you don't want something, don't buy it. Homeowners is kind of like subscribing to cable. They give you a whole bunch of channels you may or may not want, but you're getting them anyway. Homeowners is a package policy. So a primary difference between dwelling and homeowners is that dwelling policies do not have minimum standards. Homeowners policies do have minimum standards. Another primary difference is that homeowners policies come with liability and theft coverage. Dwelling policies do not come with liability and theft. You have to endorse it on. So let's run through these just one more time. There are three primary dwelling policies, DP1, DP2, DP3. Dwelling policy 1, dwelling policy 2, dwelling policy 3. DP1 is basic, DP2 is broad, DP3 is special. There's 6 homeowners policies, an HO2, HO3, HO4, HO5, HO6, HO8. HO2 is broad, HO3 is special, HO4 is renters, HO5 is comprehensive, HO6 is condo, HO8 is modified. The dwelling policy basic perils are flee, fire, lightning, explosion, external explosion. The dwelling policy extended perils are wind, hail, aircraft, riot, vehicle, volcano, explosion, smoke. Volcanoes were 7 days. The dwelling policy 2 broad policy covers flee and wharves and big effect, burglary, ice, glass, accidental discharge, falling objects, freezing of plumbing, electrical, collapsing and tearing asunder. The DP2 extends the vehicle coverage to a person in the house damaging the house. A DP3 is special. Special covers everything except what's excluded, like flood, earthquakes, which were 3 days, intentional loss, inherent vice, wear and tear, underground pipes, pollution damage. The HO2 broad covered my structure against the broad perils. The HO3 special covered my structure against open peril. The HO4 renter's policy did not have coverage A and B because you don't own the house. The HO5 is the best policy. The HO6 condo is similar to a renter's policy, except the HO6 does get coverage A. And then the HO8 is the modified historic home. So I have a few questions. What percentage is coverage C of coverage A of a dwelling policy? And the answer is 0, because dwelling, you don't have to have minimum standards. But if I said what percentage is coverage C of coverage A of a homeowner's policy, that would be 50%. What percentage is coverage B of coverage A of a homeowner's policy? That's 10%. Which homeowner's policy would I purchase if I have a condominium? An HO6? Which homeowner's policy is known as contents only? That'd be an HO4 because that's a renter who only needs their stuff covered for. If I have 2 properties, 2 houses on my one property, how many homeowners policies can I have? 1. How many families can you have in a homeowner's policy? 4. How many units can you have in dwelling? 5. Which policy automatically covers theft and liability? That's homeowners. Which policy is more of a package? That's homeowners. So homeowners and dwelling policies are very similar, but they're also very different. They have the same coverages that you can get, but homeowners gives them to you in a package. Dwelling, you have to choose the ones you want. There is no basic policy under homeowners because homeowners is better insurance than dwelling. So anyway, let's continue on into the next chapter.